Then we get impatient and we say, let me try another page. All right, then we get impatient and we say, let me turn my Wi-Fi back on and see if that'll work. Had it off, had it on, didn't work. Let me try it again. Then we do it again. And then here we go. We say, okay, do it again. And there we go, Zoom. And then it just goes right back to the start. Like, not today. It wants me off of it, I guess. Like, this is the first time it's done this today. And I have spent a lot of time on my phone today because I have not had the energy to do nothing else after giving away so much of this light that has been given to me. I shared it last night with about 11 to 12 people, each of whom left a positive review after their introduction on ACEs. It was a starter conversation. And as a matter of fact, I think of it as a starter conversation because it has to go beyond the starter conversation. The starter conversation doesn't even give you the the starter conversation is barely the tip of the iceberg. Because in 2 hours, I need you to take into consideration that a 2-hour training is going to introduce you to a concept. Okay? Now, depending on the state of your brain, your geographical state, as well as its mental state, the amount of that information that you will retain in 2 hours will vary. And odds are that you may only leave that 2 hours with 3 to 5 things that were really sticky. And that's only if the presenter does a really good job. If you're coming into this 2 hours and you got a lot of shit on your mind, got to eat when you get home, got to cook, got to pick, whatever. If you got a lot of stuff on your mind and you are currently thinking you don't know how you going to get it done right now, I'm going to encourage you to work really hard to get into this 2 hours of the meeting and ask your problems to wait for you in the car because you know they're going to be there when you get done. And for this 2 hours, I'm going to ask you to set your problems to the side. I'm not going to ask you to check your feelings at the door because I want all your feels here, right? Like, you know how angry one can be when they have stress at work, stress at home, stress inside themselves. Stress if they watch TV, they got stress based on the shows that they watching because some of their characters are getting out of character and they not liking where it's going. Some people get really invested in TV shows, so there's another added layer of stress. I'm not going to get through this conversation without mentioning that if you watch the media or the news, there is an additional added layer of stress, just depending on what you're watching and how much time you're spending on it. Okay, so all of this is going to influence your state. So when I say to people during these 2-hour trainings, on a daily basis, keep a record of what has access to your 5 senses. If you are interested in taking yourself to the next level and you have had a really hard time trying to get it done in the past, that's who this conversation is for. Right? That thing that needs to get done in your life, it can be in any realm of your life. And within Aces Matter, I created 8 realms so that people can isolate these areas based on this information that is publicly available on multiple different credible websites, that these are the 8 realms of wellness of life. And when one finds balance in these 8 realms of life, there is harmony amongst their cellular environment, right? Because I also make sure that the people who come in these trainings understand how, at a very surface level, what in the hell is going on behind all of this skin? Skin, S-K-I-N, largest organ of the body, right? Why is it the largest organ of the body in the first place? Okay, curious minds want to know, right? But we know underneath the skin, it's a lot going on that automatically keeps us going. So there's a few key questions in the 2-hour training that are prerequisites to understanding just how bad the impact of ACEs are, and how understanding that whether you left the house without childhood adversities or you were in a house full of childhood adversities, childhood adversity exposure, you may be that person in a relationship with somebody that wasn't, and maybe there's a communication gap. If that is the case, hey, one of my referral partners offers a class, because the only way out of this is to be taught. Let me repeat. The only way out of this is to be taught how to get out. There is no freaking magic wand going to show up at your door and grant you one wish. That's only in the cartoons. And after all those years, I applied for that Ed McMahon magazine entry. If you order magazines, you're going to be entered to win. And they would show these people coming with these big old checks and these big old balloons. And like, that was how my people saw themselves getting rich. So I joined too, and start ordering magazines as soon as I could. And all that I did was got in the debt, because them balloons and that big old fake check never came to my door. But then when you grow up, you realize you're being marketed to. Your 5 senses are marketed to 24/7. 24/7 for those of us who sleep with our phones by us, sleep with electronic devices. You are being marketed to. We are being marketed to 24/7. All 5 of our senses. Okay, so back to the 2-hour training. If you want people to do something about it, the information must first be put in a language that makes sense to them. All right. Everybody's going to come in there and say, well, feels like there's no hope. Well, you know what? What was it feeling like before tonight? What was it feeling like before today? Because you looked pretty hopeless before you came in. Okay. All jokes aside, right? You got to make the conversation more than just like, well, here's another Hiroshima bomb of just how bad the world is. I think we can, if you watch TV, you can pretty much look at how, like the news, local news has a lineup of stories, and the majority of them, the times that I've had the TV on, were all bad news. Somebody done died. Some natural disaster. It's just like, oh, so you watch that all day and you're like, man, I'm having a bad day and I don't know why. I know why. Because your 5 senses, them thing behind that largest organ in your body, been watching bad news all day, and all of a sudden you want them cells to just be happy. Them cells in there thinking the same thing you thinking on the outside. Well, shit, why are we trying so hard? Shit, everything else is bad. And if we continue to give all these different things access to our 5 senses, then it's going to be hard to get to that goal. So we got to start pulling back in some of these 8 realms of wellness areas that matter to us, and start looking at, here's where I say I want to be as a friend, as a partner, as a coworker, as a boss, as a real estate agent, as a healthcare worker, as a social worker, as a government employee, just as a person. And for some reason, I've been struggling trying to get there. I ain't who I paint to be. And if the internet says I have between 6 and 70,000 thoughts a day, why ain't them thoughts elevating me? Okay. So I want the conversation to start off with people understanding a little bit about themselves that makes them equal to everybody else, regardless to what your skin color is, regardless to what your background is. Answer these 8 questions upon arrival. It is a scavenger hunt. You are allowed to use Google. Even Einstein said, trying to get your brain to remember something that it doesn't need more than once is really a waste of brain real estate, right? So look something up. Now, he didn't say it in those words. That was how I interpret it, because communication is important. But basically, there's an Einstein quote that alludes to the idea of it doesn't make you a bad person if your brain does not recall information as well. And you have to look stuff up a lot. I carry so much guilt because I felt like I wasn't smart if I couldn't just say, all the presidents of the United States. You know what? I don't know because I don't follow that. and I don't care to know. That's not something that's of interest to me. What about the 50 states? You know what? I can honestly tell you that I don't know all those either by heart, but I can go to Google and I can use my resources to do it, right? So I'm going to throw that tangent in there because I want people to feel safe in this conversation. Again, whatever your education level is, if you don't know something, don't you sit here and just go with the flow. You say something. Right? We've been indoctrinated to believe that we show up to class, we sit in rows, and we wait for the teacher to ask us if we got any questions, even if she said something confusing 30 minutes ago. And as a child, I could not tolerate that. If I heard something confusing on the spot, before I continue any longer in this conversation, I need to know what you meant by that. Because I think what you just said is going to go on along with the rest of the stuff. And just like any TV show, I don't want to miss no parts of it. When we grew up, there was no DVRs. If you didn't watch the show at the time that it came on, wasn't no rewind button. You missed some stuff. And yeah, wasn't no recording, no none of that. Like you just missed it. So when I'm having a conversation with people who can't explain why they said what they just said, and I ask a question, and I got called out a lot on that as a child. Stop asking so many questions. Oh, that one sticks out a lot in my brain. I said that a lot because I was curious. One question in particular while we were in the car. I might have been 6 or 7 years old. And this one is very vivid. We were driving and we were on the way to our routine bingo night. Our parents worked and played bingo three times a week. Wednesday, Friday, Saturday at American Legion Post 808. It was down in the Yellow Canyon. It's down in the Yellow Canyon. So, I don't recall who's all in the car, but my granddad comes up in my mind, and his voice weighs heavy on me. My granddad's voice actually weighs heavy on me on my mom's side. But needless to say, I remember asking, why is the moon following us? We left Parkway, and I know we've been driving at least 15 minutes because Yellow Canyon is way, way back in the back of Lubbock, Texas. And ooh, every time we went there, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, it was funky every time. It was funky. Smelled like death every time. And it turns out, at one point in Lubbock, there was actually a dead body there, which was causing a lot of the funk, and they found somebody that had been missing for a while. You can look that up. Look that up by American Legion, Yellow Canyon. Yeah, stinky place. But anyhow, nobody could explain to me as a 6 or 7 year old, whatever I was. I just know I was young. And I just remember being so curious about the clouds and this time we driving, and because they used to smoke in the car. You know, it was okay to smoke in the car back then. So I got my head out the window because of all that smoke. You put your head out the window as a kid, right? And it was just kind of fun. And I just remember looking out the window and noticed that, damn, the moon was at the house when we left, and it's over here too. Why is the moon following us? That question is so vivid in my mind. Nobody could answer it. Nobody could answer it. And so the 2-hour trainings should help people make a connection with why they believe what they believe. And it is important during that 2-hour training that we emphasize age 0 through 7. Like, you're going to leave here with a textbook definition of ACEs, but more importantly, you're going to leave here knowing just exactly how ACEs impacted you. And we're going to be able to accomplish that just by helping making connections with those 8 questions that we encourage people to ask at the beginning of the time together. Because when you connect the dots of the Bible, the body, biology, and the brain, and you weave those two together for people, we all the same, basically. We all the same. As a matter of fact, a part of the biology reveal is just how alike we are to each other as human beings, DNA being like 90 something percent exact, no matter what color you are, how close our DNA is. That's why when they run those DNA tests and forensics on people, they got to keep that database because we so alike. And one of the books that's on our recommended list talks about the gut and talks about one identifying factor that separates humans from each other is the DNA found in their gut biome. Our gut biomes are different, right? Everything else pretty much the same. So helping people understand that these behaviors are being directed by something bigger than the person holding the flesh, the host. I told him last night that you are the host of these 40 trillion cells. It was 37 million. That's what comes up on Google if you go with the first 10 results. And look, don't be looking at me funny because I'm not trying to get people to leave out of these 2 hours feeling like a doctor. Nope. We'll get there later if you're interested in that. But right now, I'm going to use fewer words. They won't be that big because I want to make sure that instead of me trying to look good and academic, that you get what I'm trying to say. Okay, if you want the academics, I got a couple YouTube channels in my resource list, and have your medical dictionary next to you. But right now, I want the people to understand the Bible, the brain, the body, and biology. If we can see ACEs with these 4 B's in mind, we could be better in control of the 5 F's, right? And one of the key things that they learn in the 2-hour training is the 5 F's. Like, how does the body respond to stress, right? Stress is natural in the body, good stress. I'm getting ready for a speech. I'm getting ready to go teach or do a presentation or a job interview. That's all good stress. Like, the body is preparing to be successful. But bad stress is the body saying, what the hell is going on out there? Right? The host, what has the host gotten themselves into? And so the body's alarm system, the internal alarm system goes off, and that thing stays on. Have y'all ever, stay with me, lived in an apartment building or been in a building where the fire alarm just goes off constantly? I've had teachers complain about being in school buildings where the fire alarm was just going off and they didn't know if the kids were doing it on purpose, right? That's what it's like in the body of a person with a lot of ACEs, the ones that hadn't worked through them, right? So we want people to understand that the Bible, the body, biology, and the brain need to be seen as one if you want to get rid of the 5 F's. Or not get rid of the 5 F's, but learn how to, feel when the 5 F's are coming on. F like Frank. And they go, so I've always known that it's like 3 F's. Well, actually... and then somebody else goes, well, I've heard there's 4. And I was like, there's a 5th one I'm about to drop on you. The only way I know that 5th one is because I was reading a biology book by a man named Robert Sapolsky, How to Behave. Or actually it was called Behave. And then basically understanding human behavior. That was my COVID book that led me to this conversation today. Dude's a genius. He's on my list, right? So he's in my library. If you want to understand how he feels about human behavior with all the smart stuff that he knows about our bodies, go read his book, and that'll cover the biology part. He even gives you a little hors d'oeuvre or a little sprinkle of religion in there too. So if you're into that, it's going to be in there. And of course, he understands the brain like no other. So you're going to get that in there as well. The body he doesn't go into as much detail, but you're going to walk away with a lot about a lot if you're interested in knowing how all these B's connect to the F's in life. And I'm guessing y'all are wondering what the 5th F is. For those of y'all that don't know none of the F's, I'm going to give it to you simple, right? This is the 2-hour conversation. And our body's response to stress, according to the experts, and doing my independent studies, the body is going to do 1 of 5 things, sometimes a combination of things when it does not feel safe. If you don't have the tools, okay? You have to teach yourself this, because remember, many of us who have ACEs, we skipped that lesson. Like, it was like when we signed up for electives, it was like teaching kids how to understand their body and emotional. emotions. That was an elective class, and they was like, no, I'll go take home ec instead. So that's like what it was growing up for some of us. Like, there was no talk of like how to behave based on your body functions, right? It was how to behave based on do the hell what I said do and don't ask no questions, right? All over the place. But back to the F. So under stress, when your body doesn't feel safe, these experts say your body is going to either fight verbally, physically, do something to cause harm, okay? Freeze, just freeze, maybe like an anxiety attack at its worst, or freeze like just being numb and unable to move or get out the bed, or like literally freeze, right? Just an example that I can share is for people who have gone through sexual abuse in childhood, especially at an early age, especially by somebody that you trusted and cared for. Some of their bodies weren't ready for that, and they froze. One of the subject matter experts that I read said something about it's like they cope with the situation by having an out-of-body experience. Right? That's how they tolerate the pain of it. The third thing that the expert said that we may do is flight. Like, we gonna get the heck up out of here. Bye. Right? Moving a lot. Many of us with ACEs, we have this thing where we are chasing the next apartment deal because, man, I didn't handle my finances this month. I might need to move and try to get out of this lease. Or maybe we just moving a lot because relationships didn't work out, or maybe jobs didn't work out, or just don't like this place. Can't seem to find comfort. Moving is a big characteristic of people who have high ACE scores, probably because they moved a lot in childhood too. Okay, that's a sign to notice. Another example of flight is breaking up with people, right? Like, sensing something and going into relationships without any intent on being serious with the other person, and then just bailing, right? F your feelings type of people, right? Or it's people who don't understand their own feelings and maybe don't want to get attached to somebody, and notice that at a cellular level, they starting to like that person. So they flight in order to avoid those feelings. Okay, I'm just repeating what the experts say. You call them in, they're going to charge you a little bit more, and I highly recommend go follow them, right? You're going to get a lot more content from them, but I'm giving you all of what I've been digging into in 2 hours, and then I'm going to break it up and go past that if I need to. So long or the short, you got fight, flight, or freeze so far. And then recently there's one called fawn, F-A-W-N. And if you think about fawn, that is also another way to think about a deer. Think of the term deer in the headlights. And so when deers are in the street and they see lights, they basically just sit there and be like, damn, life's over. I didn't see the light and it's over, right? And they get hit. So the way that I understood fawn was that we give in, right? So it can look like this. We give in to our abuser. Some call it Stockholm syndrome. We may get in situations where people, I think the Stockholm syndrome talked a little bit about making excuses for the abuser, being kind of like zombies. And then another one was if we're in relationships with narcissists or people who gaslight, right? An example of fawning would be just to give in to them, or even domestic violence people, right? Like, I need to be nice to him. This happened in my situation growing up, like where my mom was in several different relationships where her men were very abusive to her, and we heard it and saw it, but we normalized it because after one dude, she left, got another one, he did it to her, and got another one, he did it to her. So, that must be with her. They need to manage their emotions. Like, I'm thinking that as a kid, but of course you can't say that because you just like, you need some help, mama? Did it hurt when he hit you? They're like, what you want me to say? Okay, but he taking y'all to school in the morning. Okay, all right, it's going to be like that. Here we go again. So, real talk, the fawning is giving into your person that's overpower, or just basically almost like freezing, but just maybe kind of being numb. And just giving in, basically. All right, moving on. Here's the good one. Everybody's always like, so what's the fifth one? What's the fifth one? What's the fifth one? I'm going to go back to my boy Robert Sapolsky. And a few others actually, but Robert is the one who first exposed me to him, and then the other people just clarified it for me. But Robert told us about fornicating. It's our natural creation. Basically we're here to reproduce. Location, right? And so another response seen heavily in our sex trafficking industry are children who have been sexually abused and may not have gotten the proper support, if any at all. And this is not a blanket statement, right? Like, I'm not saying all all sex workers or sex traffickers or sex trafficking participants and unwilling participants. I'm not saying all of them have been sexually abused in childhood. I'm not saying that as a blanket statement that all sex workers or sex trafficking victims are childhood sexual abuse survivors. Not to make that a blanket statement, but I can tell you in the sex industry, there is a high percentage of them who were sexually abused or misused in childhood. Direct correlations to it, right? The number is higher than it should be, point blank. So we help people understand, like, now when we go back to the top and so at an elementary level, we understand that the things that have access to our five senses, things that have access to our children's five senses, will have access to our cellular environment, right? Like, try to make it like gamified, like a game out of. Think of these 40 trillion cells responding to all the things that have access to it, okay? On the inside, that you are the director, right? You got the eyes, you're going in the direction, you're doing all of that, right? So if your five senses, let's say what I tell them is that your five senses dictate the type of access you have to your sixth sense, right? And one of the things that stuck out to me a lot as a child is that I would always remember these cartoons, maybe Tom and Jerry, where there would be a devil and an angel on the shoulder. That was so prevalent in a lot of the cartoons that I watched. And so I interpreted that in my adult life to mean like, that's my ego and my alter ego, or Satan and Jesus on one side, right? Like, either way, this one thought was telling somebody to do the right thing, and another thought was telling somebody not to do the right thing. So with these two on my shoulder, I try to tell the audience members, when you think about the five senses, whatever has access to them will dictate which of those things on your shoulders that you serve. You either going to be serving the red one or the white one. Okay, the one in the red or the one in the white. So if all day your eyes are watching social media, like just violent stuff or whatever, right? And then your TV, maybe that's what it is. Maybe your eyes are exposed to a lot of violence every day, or just a lot of news, or just a lot of like things that just aren't very happy. Then at a cellular level, your body is responding to this information, whether you believe it or not, right? And so now your awareness and especially from 0 to 7, and your belief system is being developed by what you're seeing, right? Your belief system about food was determined in your first 7 years, right? Nutrition was determined in the first 7 years. Actually, your nutrition was developed based on your mom's diet at the time. And men, you're not off the hook, because we also know that a man's sperm health is equally as important to a woman's body health before she gets pregnant. But we out here talk about what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It stays in your cells. They want you to think it does stay in Vegas, because, as a matter of fact, if you come to the follow-up trainings, you're going to learn about this thing in your brain called the vagus nerve, or the thing that is attached to your brain called the vagus nerve, number 10. It's pretty long. Subject matter experts say it is in control of a lot of things. So what happens in Vegas definitely does stay in Vegas, because Vegas is going to be one sending the nerves telling you how to go from 0 to 60 or 0 to prison as one of my colleagues says, when we make decisions without thinking first. And so for people to understand that at minimum, let's start focusing on what our kids are being exposed to, okay? And what of those things with the five senses do we have some influence over? And I use the word influence instead of control, because the only people we have control over is ourselves. So if we're going to be going out here asking kids to be thinking about like, hey, if you don't want to be so violent, I just learned some science that said you probably shouldn't be playing that one game that got all the cops and the killings and the prostitutes and stuff, the Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, I think you should probably like play that like less than 40 hours. What you doing, 50 hours a week on it right now? So like we have to start thinking about what has access to our children's five senses, because the cells don't know. The cells just taking that stuff in because they like, okay, that's what the human doing. All right, that's how we rolling, right? And so when it's time to get froggy, they jump, because guess what? I saw them do it on TV, and the media perpetrates it. They show it. Social media perpetrates it. So now we don't realize how much that is influencing our cellular environment. And so again, my subject matter experts that I study, they may not put it that way, and I welcome people to come and correct me and make sure that I'm saying it right. But at the end of the day, many of our people don't fact check anyway, right? Like this stuff sounds pretty good, right? It's pretty accurate. You can call the experts in, but they might not be able to like talk to you based on walking in your shoes, because guess what? People don't even want to drive through where you live for some of us, right? So bringing this conversation to people with the Bible, the body, biology, and the brain in mind, making sure they understand that at a cellular level, we are bigger than our choices, right? We get honest, right? I told a Credible Messenger group, who some are formerly incarcerated people who have gotten out trying to turn their life around and use their voice to help youth. I said, you know what? Y'all might look at me and think, oh, this lady's so proper. She already got her certificates and her signing. She's so fancy. I'd be like, you know what? I did my first stint when I was 12 years old, overnight. Juvie Detention Center, Lubbock, Texas, detained. And then I got 3 more after that. So I just want to go on record to say, don't judge a book by its cover. So we get really real with them and let them know we just like you. We putting on a face every day too, trying to hopefully don't nobody bring up our past. But for us, when we work through our ACEs, remember I said what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That Vegas nerves, it remembers every lie you done ever told. There's a pocket full of lies in your body right now. There's a pocket full of lies. There are cells in your body that keep up with the lies you tell. Now, I'm not going to go into that in the first 2-hour trainings, but when people start thinking about their decisions at a cellular level and understand that stuff's going to be stored in some of them 40 trillion cells, because that is their job to remember that lie you told yesterday about where you was on your lunch break. Y'all think I'm making this up. I don't play about my learning. Right? If I sit and learn something for a long time, my baby mom make damn sure y'all understand it. I didn't collected all this damn student debt going to school. So yeah, I want to make this a great 2 hours for people. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, fornicate, Bible, body, brain, and biology. 2 hours. Understanding adverse childhood experiences. Hugging our audience, crying with our audience, fist bumping with our audience, saying, man, we done all messed up, but we can't change what happened in the past, but we can change what happens in the future.